Revelation is one of the most intriguing and impactful passages in the Bible. Shrouded in mystery, this book evokes a vision full of symbolism, metaphors, and prophecies that defy the imagination and arouse the curiosity of all who come across its pages. Written by the Apostle John, exiled on the island of Patmos, Revelation is not only a divine revelation about the events culminating in the end times, but also a message of hope and redemption for those seeking to understand its deeper meaning. The narrative begins with John reporting a glorious vision of Christ, which instructs him to write down what he will see. This initial command opens the door to a journey filled with riddles and descriptions that remain enigmatic even to the greatest scholars. The reader is transported to a world where the supernatural meets the fate of humanity, where the forces of good and evil wage a final battle for control of the universe. One of the most striking and widely debated moments of Revelation is the opening of the 7 seals of the sacred scroll. Each seal unleashes a cataclysmic event, beginning with the arrival of the 4 horsemen. These knights have been the subject of speculation and fascination for centuries, representing concepts ranging from literal disasters to spiritual and social conditions that afflict humanity. The first rider appears mounted on a white horse, carrying a bow and sporting a crown. This knight symbolizes conquest, but what it actually represents is open to interpretation. Some see it as a symbol of divine victory, perhaps even a representation of Christ in his triumphant form. Others, however, believe that he is a deception, a conqueror who masks his true intentions. Its duality challenges us to reflect on power and what true leadership means. Soon after, the second rider appears on a red horse. He carries a sword and is on a mission to take peace from the earth. Representing war, he personifies the conflict and violence that have plagued the world throughout history. In a world where wars are constant and seem inevitable, the Red Knight serves as a grim reminder of the consequences of hatred and division. The third rider is the one mounted on a black horse, holding a scale. It symbolizes hunger, but not just literal hunger. The scales it carries is a symbol of inequality and scarcity, where few enjoy abundance while many suffer in poverty. It confronts us with the reality of an unequal world, where wealth is poorly distributed and resources are often misused. Finally, the fourth rider appears on a pale horse, whose name is Death. This rider is followed by Hell, bringing with him the inevitability of the end. It not only symbolizes human mortality, but also the fear and mystery surrounding the idea of death. Their presence is a reminder of our common destiny and the need to prepare for what lies beyond. The 4 horsemen are more than just apocalyptic figures. They are archetypes that reflect aspects of the human condition and forces that shape the world. They challenge us to consider issues such as ambition, conflict, inequality, and mortality in a way that transcends time and culture. However, the horsemen are only the beginning of the narrative of the apocalypse. As the seals continue to be opened, John's visions become more and more intense and disturbing. The suspense increases with the introduction of other symbols, such as the 144,000 sealed ones who will be spared from destruction, the trumpets that announce even more terrible judgments, and the bowls of God's wrath poured out on the earth. Every element of Revelation is carefully designed to provoke an emotional and intellectual reaction. The vivid imagery and universal themes resonate deeply, causing the reader to wonder not only about the meaning of the text, but also about their own place in the divine plan. At this point, the audience is left in a state of anticipation, eager to find out what else will be revealed. After all, Apocalypse is not just a story about the end of the world, but a journey to understand the purpose of existence and the ultimate destiny of humanity. As we dive deeper into Revelation, John's visions become even darker and more impactful. The 4 horsemen, although they have already been introduced as harbingers of the end, are only the prelude to a series of devastating events that defy human comprehension. It is here that the suspense reaches its apex. and the reader or viewer finds himself captivated by a mystery that seems to transcend time and space. Who wouldn't feel compelled to keep going, knowing that the fate of the world hangs in the balance? The opening of the fifth seal presents a disturbing sight, the souls of the martyrs under the altar crying out for justice. They ask God how long it will take for their deaths to be avenged. This moment is a powerful emotional trigger, as it appeals to our sense of justice and our connection to human suffering. Who hasn't wondered when the injustices we see around us will be corrected? This is the moment when John reminds us that even though suffering seems never-ending, there is a divine plan at work, even if we can't fully comprehend it. When the sixth seal is opened, the scenario changes dramatically. There is a great earthquake. The sun turns black as a sack of horsehair, the moon becomes like blood, and the stars of heaven fall to the earth. Imagine for a moment the visual impact of these descriptions. They evoke a cosmic apocalypse, an event that not only shakes the earth, but the universe itself. The suspense here is palpable as we wonder, what could happen next? Then comes the climax of the opening of the seals, the seventh seal. When this is broken, there is silence in the sky for about half an hour. This silence is as deafening as any sound could be. It symbolizes a moment of expectation, an interval before the next act of the divine drama. It's like a break in a thriller movie, where the audience holds their breath, knowing that something even grander is coming. With the silence broken, the seven trumpets appear. Each trumpet announces a judgment on earth, each one more terrible than the last. From fire and hail mixed with blood, which destroys a third of the vegetation, to the fall of a great star called wormwood, which makes the waters bitter, these plagues are described with an intensity that keeps the reader or viewer on the edge of his attention. The use of numbers like 1/3 to describe the extent of the destruction adds an element of eerie precision, as if every detail has been meticulously planned. One of the most impressive moments occurs with the fifth trumpet, when an abyss is opened and demonic creatures emerge to torment humanity. John describes these creatures as locusts with human faces, hair like those of women, and teeth like those of lions. This is a classic example of how the apocalypse mixes familiar and strange elements to create a truly unsettling effect. The viewer's mind desperately tries to make sense of these images, but is forced to accept the mystery as an integral part of the narrative. Then we come to the sixth trumpet blast, which releases 4 bound angels by the great Euphrates River. These angels lead an army of 200 million horsemen, bringing death to a third of humanity. Again, the use of exact numbers adds an almost surreal realism to John's vision. This army, described in vivid detail, seems to represent a force of destruction so vast as to defy any attempt at comprehension. But the apocalypse is not just a story of destruction, it is also a story of revelation and redemption. After the sixth trumpet, John is instructed to eat a small book that is sweet as honey in his mouth, but bitter in his stomach. This action symbolizes the twofold nature of the message of revelation. It is sweet because it promises victory and redemption, but bitter because it reveals the terrible judgments that will come before it. This is a powerful moment of reflection, where the viewer is challenged to confront their own reactions to the apocalypse. Are we ready to face the bitter truths that accompany the sweet promises of salvation? Another crucial element is the introduction of the 2 witnesses, figures who prophesy for 1,260 days before being killed by the beast. Their fate is both tragic and triumphant, as they are resurrected after 3.5 days, ascending to heaven on a cloud. This is one of the most dramatic moments in Revelation, conjuring up images of martyrdom and resurrection that resonate deeply with the central themes of the Bible. The climax of the trumpet drama occurs with the 7th blast, which announces that the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ. This is a moment of triumph that seems to temporarily interrupt the sequence of judgments, offering a glimpse of God's ultimate victory. However, the suspense does not end here. Revelation continually reminds us that even in the midst of celebration, there is more to come. Now the stage is set for the final events, the 7 bowls of God's wrath and the Battle of Armageddon. Are you prepared to find out what happens when the apocalypse reaches its peak? As Revelation progresses, the narrative reaches a new level of intensity with the outpouring of the 7 bowls of God's wrath. These events are described as the final judgments, symbolizing the total purification of the earth before the ultimate triumph of good over evil. Each cup poured out carries with it a manifestation of divine judgment, reaching humanity in ways that go beyond any natural catastrophe ever imagined. This is the moment when the audience is led to reflect on the nature of divine justice and the consequences of human choices. The first bowl is poured out and inflicts malignant and painful wounds upon those who bear the mark of the beast and worship his image. This event, in addition to being visually impactful, evokes a feeling of repulsion and urgency. This is not just physical punishment, but a reminder that choices made against God's will have profound consequences. The symbolism of wounds also raises questions about the moral and spiritual corruption of humanity. The second bowl turns the entire sea into blood, killing all sea creatures. This is a devastating blow to the ecology of the planet, symbolizing the destruction of life and the irreversible impact that humanity can cause by disrespecting divine creation. By imagining an entire ocean tinged red, the audience is confronted with a terrifying sight that emphasizes the interconnectedness between humanity and the natural world. The third bowl follows a similar line, turning rivers and water sources into blood. John reports that an angel declares divine justice in this act, stating that those who shed the blood of the saints and prophets now drink the blood as their retribution. This is a powerful time of moral reversal, where the punishment directly reflects the actions of those who opposed God's will. He reminds us that ultimately, every action has a proportionate reaction in the divine scheme. The fourth bowl introduces a plague of scorching heat, where the sun burns people with fire. It is interesting to note that even in the face of such suffering, John describes people cursing God's name rather than repenting. This reaction emphasizes the obstinacy of the human heart and the refusal of many to acknowledge their shortcomings, even when faced with obvious consequences. This point serves as an emotional trigger for the audience, provoking empathy and reflection on one's own capacity for regret. The fifth bowl plunges the kingdom of the beast into darkness. This darkness is not only physical but also spiritual, symbolizing the collapse of power structures that oppose God. The followers of the beast, tormented by the darkness and wounds of the previous plagues, are shown gnashing their teeth in pain and despair. This is a grim reminder that earthly power is ephemeral and that true authority resides in the divine. The sixth bowl dries up the Euphrates River, paving the way for the kings of the east to gather for the final battle. This preparation for Armageddon is shrouded in suspense, as the audience knows that the decisive confrontation between good and evil is approaching. Unclean spirits, described as frogs, come out of the mouths of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet, gathering the nations for war. The tension grows as the symbolic elements combine to create an atmosphere of unsettling anticipation. The seventh and last bowl is poured into the air, and a mighty voice from the throne of God declares, "It is done." This is the climactic moment, where thunder, lightning, and an unprecedented earthquake shake the earth. John describes that the cities of the nations fall, the mountains are leveled, and the islands disappear. Great hailstones fall from the sky, bringing final destruction to those who have rejected God. The vivid and catastrophic depiction keeps the audience in a state of absolute attention, while the weight of divine justice is completely revealed. But even in the midst of so much devastation, Revelation is not only a story of judgment, but also of renewal. The pouring of the bowls can be seen as the last step in a purification process, paving the way for the creation of a new heaven and a new earth. Each act of destruction is balanced by a promise of rebuilding, offering hope in the midst of chaos. At this point, the audience is led to wonder, what is the purpose of such judgments? Do they exist only to punish or also to redeem? Revelation suggests that while judgment is inevitable, it also serves as a means of awakening humanity to the need for repentance and reconciliation with God. As the stage is being set for the Battle of Armageddon, the tension reaches an unbearable point. The events that have unfolded thus far have been a constant reminder of the seriousness of sin and divine justice. But there is also a promise of victory for those who remain faithful. Are you ready to witness the ultimate showdown between good and evil? The concept of Armageddon, present in the book of Revelation, is one of the highest and most exciting points of this narrative. Described as the final battle between the forces of good and evil, Armageddon is much more than just a military event. Located in the Valley of Megiddo in present-day Palestine, the place where this battle takes place becomes a symbol of all the conflict between the cosmic forces that will determine the fate of humanity. However, for many, Armageddon goes beyond a literal war. It is a deeply symbolic event, representing an internal struggle that everyone faces. The Battle of Armageddon should not be viewed merely as a physical war. According to the scriptures, it also has a profound spiritual significance, being a confrontation between the forces of good, represented by God and his armies, and the forces of evil, commanded by Satan. Beyond what we can see with our eyes, this struggle is reflected in a psychological, moral, and spiritual war, where the real enemy is not another human being, but the evil and corruption that dwells within us. Here, Armageddon is not just a battle on the physical battlefield, but a reflection of the daily choices we make between good and evil, between virtue and vice. On a more personal level, the struggle described in Armageddon can be seen as the clash between the best and worst instincts that dwell within every human being. This interpretation is crucial to understanding the apocalypse in our modern times. It is a constant struggle for our own morality, for our ethics, for our values. In this sense, Armageddon is a metaphor for all the challenges we face as we seek a path of light and goodness in a world that often pulls us into the darkness of violence, selfishness, and corruption. However, by expanding this analysis to the collective context, Armageddon takes on another dimension. It becomes the representation of the global tensions that, over the centuries, have threatened the existence of humanity. Nuclear war, climate crises, social inequality, and religious conflicts are manifestations of this cosmic battle that never seems to end. If, on the one hand, we are witnessing physical wars and material destruction, on the other, we also see an ideological struggle, a battle for the moral leadership of the world, which will decide not only who will win, but also the kind of society that will emerge after the storm. In this scenario, Armageddon can be interpreted as a wake-up call, a warning that our choices as a society have immense consequences and that we are constantly on the verge of a collapse that could define our future. The struggle of Armageddon is the struggle of all men and women, each with their own role on this great stage. The forces that push us toward destruction also invite us to strive for redemption, and the question that remains is, how far are we willing to go to achieve peace, justice, and morality? But at the end of all this great battle, the victory is God's. The New Jerusalem, the heavenly city that comes down from heaven, brings with it the promise of a new era of eternal peace. This new heaven and new earth will be defined by the absence of suffering, by the presence of harmony among all beings. The New Jerusalem will be a place where life flourishes without the need for sun or moon, because divine glory will be the only light that illuminates everything. For those who believe, this will be the moment of eternal rest, of communion with the divine, where human life will be completely transformed. The heavenly city is described in brilliant detail. Its pearly gates, streets of pure gold, and the presence of God at the center of it all. This representation is not only figurative, it speaks of the ideal state we can achieve as human beings if we can overcome our limitations, our addictions, and our attachment to materialism. The New Jerusalem is a symbol of spiritual transcendence, a promise that after the struggle, there will be a perfect state of union with the divine and with others. This vision of the heavenly city is not only a promise of the distant future, but also a hope that moves us in the present. It serves as a beacon for all who seek a greater purpose, for those who believe that, despite adversity and constant struggle, there is a real possibility of redemption. Armageddon, therefore, is not an end, but the beginning of something new, a complete transformation of what it means to be human. He reminds us that in the end, what really matters is not the external conflicts, but the inner peace that we can cultivate in our hearts. The final battle, therefore, represents more than a war, but the culmination of all our choices throughout history. Armageddon is not only the end of an era, but the time of rebirth and transformation for those who remain true to their true spiritual mission. This is the true climax of the apocalypse, the moment when, after the struggle, the victory, the light, and the peace that we all seek arises. Armageddon is, therefore, the great lesson of the apocalypse. The real war is won, not with weapons, but with faith, love, and hope. Throughout history, the apocalypse has been an inexhaustible source of inspiration for various artistic and cultural manifestations. From ancient Renaissance paintings to more contemporary science fiction films, the themes covered in the Book of Revelation continue to fascinate and provoke deep reflections on the fate of humanity, morality, and the future of civilization. The powerful image of the four horsemen, with its imposing and symbolic figures, has become an icon in Western culture, constantly revisited in different contexts. The impact of Revelation on the arts is not limited to visual representations, but also permeates literature, music, and film. Works such as Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy and John Milton's Paradise Lost have deep roots in the apocalyptic vision of the Bible, and even more modern writers such as Cormac McCarthy in The Road explore themes of destruction, hope, and renewal with direct echoes of the apocalypse. Not only did the apocalypse shape medieval and Renaissance literature, but it also found new ground in dystopian works that depict a bleak future where humanity faces its own extinction. Films such as Mad Max or Children of Hope find inspiration in apocalyptic visions of destruction and renewal, where characters, such as the Four Horsemen, embody forces that determine the fate of the entire society. The apocalyptic vision is not only an artistic construct, but is also reflected in the collective anxieties of societies in times of great uncertainty. In modern times, in a world where the threats of global catastrophes such as climate change, pandemics, and political crises have become more palpable, many have come to revise the ancient prophecies of the apocalypse in a new light. The idea that the end of the world may be closer than ever begins to resonate with many people, especially at a time when technology advances at a rapid pace. But humanity faces such profound existential questions. In times of uncertainty, John's visions in Revelation are reinterpreted, no longer as a simple warning of a future cataclysm, but as a mirror of the crises we face today. The rise of political extremism, growing social inequality, environmental destruction, and global pandemics are just some of the elements that fuel the idea that we are, in fact, living in an era that already bears, in many ways, the signs of the end. For some, the Four Horsemen are already among us, no longer as mythological figures, but as metaphors for contemporary global challenges. Climate change, for example, is often seen as a reflection of the green horse rider, which represents the death and destruction that results from a negligent and selfish world. Droughts, floods, and natural disasters seem to confirm the idea that the earth is being destroyed, not by a sudden cataclysm, but by a series of misguided choices made over centuries. The COVID-19 pandemic, in turn, brought to light the fear of the plague, represented by the Knight of the Black Horse, whose power over death is symbolic of our vulnerability in the face of diseases and our own fragility. The issues of war and violence, which have never disappeared, continue to remind us of the imminent threat of the rider of the red horse, whose battles and destructions are the direct results of human tensions. With this, the question that arises is the apocalypse a simple story of destruction, or does it contain a moral lesson that we can still apply in our day? In many cases, people wonder if the prophecy of Revelation is actually a warning about our own behavior. Are we doomed to repeat the same mistakes that led past civilizations to their downfall? Or is there still time to avoid disaster and achieve redemption? This is the central dilemma of contemporary reflections on the apocalypse. The apocalypse can be seen, then, as a metaphor for the need for change. In an increasingly polarized and fragmented world, it provides an opportunity for collective reflection and introspection. The end does not necessarily have to be an inevitable catastrophe, but it can be the beginning of something new, an opportunity for humanity to renew itself and reassess its place in the world. The real question is whether we can learn from the past and change our course, or whether we will be consumed by our own mistakes. In many cultures around the world, the notion of the end of the world is not only treated with fear, but also with hope. The apocalypse, as the various religious and spiritual traditions indicate, is also a chance for purification, renewal, and restoration of the lost balance. It can be seen, then, not as a purely destructive event, but as a tipping point that gives us the chance to start over and build a new world order, more just and more in line with the highest spiritual values. This leads to reflection on what it would mean for each of us to live in apocalyptic times. Many believe that we are living in these times, although the manifestations of the end are not as obvious as a great war or cataclysm. Instead, the apocalypse presents itself in more subtle ways, such as an erosion of moral norms, a growing indifference to the suffering of others, or the rapid destruction of our natural environment. These signs are invisible to many, but to others they represent the real battle of the apocalypse, a struggle for spiritual salvation and the preservation of human life in an increasingly corrupted world. Yet, at the same time, Revelation continues to serve as a powerful symbol of renewal, as it is often destruction that leads to creation. This may be the great lesson of Revelation, the idea that even in the darkest moments, there is the possibility of a new beginning. The battle we all fight, whether internal or external, can result in the construction of a new reality, a new society that, instead of being destroyed, will be able to reinvent itself and transform itself into something higher and purer. The apocalypse, far from being just a narrative of destruction and end, carries with it a profound message of renewal, hope, and reflection. Throughout all the blocks we have explored, we have seen how the concept of Armageddon, the final battle between the forces of good and evil, is not just a cataclysmic event that will occur in the distant future. Rather, it is a metaphor that accompanies us in the present, reflecting the internal and external struggles we all face on our personal and collective journey. Armageddon, as already discussed, is not just a physical war fought between armies on the battlefield. It is, at its core, a spiritual, moral, and psychological struggle. The war we see in the world around us, ideological wars, social conflicts, political tensions, and even environmental crises, are all manifestations of this cosmic battle between the forces of light and darkness, between good and evil. And each of us, in our everyday lives, is engaged in this struggle, whether in the choices we make, in the way we treat others, or in how we deal with the difficulties and temptations that come our way. By looking at the apocalypse as a reflection of these internal and external struggles, we can realize that even in the midst of chaos, there is always the possibility of redemption. The central message of Revelation is actually a message of hope. Despite the tribulations, there is the promise of a new beginning, a new Jerusalem that will descend from heaven, bringing with it an eternal peace, a place where there will be no more pain, suffering, or death. This vision of a heavenly city, illuminated by divine glory, is a promise that at the end of all battles, there will be peace. And this peace begins within each one of us. It is important to note that the New Jerusalem, as described in Scripture, is not just a literal city that will come at the end of time. It is also a symbol of the spiritual and personal transformation that each of us can achieve. Just as the celestial city does not need the sun or moon to light itself, our lives can also be illuminated by divine presence, truth, and justice, regardless of external circumstances. The true light, The light of wisdom and morality resides within us, and it is this light that guides us in the fight against the darkness of ignorance, selfishness, and destruction. The apocalypse, therefore, should not be seen as an end, but as an opportunity for reflection and transformation. When we face the adversities of life, when we deal with the challenges that are imposed on us, we must always remember that there is a greater purpose behind all of this. The trials we face are not only a punishment, but an invitation to elevate ourselves spiritually, to seek truth and justice in our actions and thoughts. Each difficulty is an opportunity to get closer to what is eternal and divine, so that in the end, we can achieve the peace we long for. The conclusion of Revelation is therefore a call to action. We cannot expect change to happen only in the future or in a cataclysmic event. True transformation begins now, in our hearts and in our minds. The apocalypse challenges us to reflect on our choices, on the values that guide our lives, and on the legacy we want to leave for the next generations. In an increasingly polarized and fragmented world, it is our responsibility to seek unity, peace, and justice, not only for ourselves, but for all of humanity. And so, as we close this journey through the apocalypse, we are confronted with a crucial question. What would you do if you knew the end was near? This is a question that does not only concern the distant future, but the immediate present. Revelation is not something that happens only at the end of time. It happens at every moment, whenever we choose between good and evil, between virtue and vice. Every decision we make, every word we speak, every action we take puts us closer or farther away from the heavenly city we all long to reach. It is impossible to predict the future with certainty, but Revelation teaches us that in the midst of uncertainty, there is a choice to fight for redemption, peace, and justice. A choice to build a more just and enlightened world, where the forces of good will prevail, not because a cataclysmic event has occurred, but because it was we, as humanity, who chose to walk through the light. The end, then, is not a literal end, but the beginning of a new era where spiritual transformation will be the key to building a new reality. Therefore, Revelation invites us to look within ourselves and reflect on our own spiritual journey. It challenges us to act responsibly, to live up to our highest values, and to seek true peace and enlightenment. In the end, the apocalypse is, above all, an invitation to renewal, transformation, and rebirth. He reminds us that even in the face of chaos and destruction, there is the possibility of a new beginning, of a new Jerusalem, and that this new beginning depends on our choices and actions in the present. So what would you do if you knew the end was near? Revelation challenges us to answer this question with our lives, to live in ways that we can look to the future with hope, knowing that even in the darkest of times, there is always the possibility of a new light, a new Jerusalem, and a new era of peace.